Namaste and welcome to Urban Chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I'm joined by Kanchan Gupta ji to discuss the recent reaction of the Indian liberals and the left and also the Western media towards the Taliban victory in Afghanistan. So, Kanchan sir, welcome to the show. Let's start by discussing how the Western media has covered the recent actions of Indian government. India is the only country which is issuing visa to the Afghan people as of now. Yet we see that the coverage of India in the Western media is as usual negative. Outright lies are being published, and India is being blamed as this Hindu fanatic, Hindu fascist state, which is discriminating against the Muslims. Now, isn't it funny that you have the power of Islamism conquering Afghanistan, but the real villain is apparently Hindu fascists in India?
Well, Abhinav, when you talk of Western media, you have to look at where they are coming from. For 20 years, the Western media was complicit. It was a part of the American establishment. It was part of the American enterprise, telling the world what a great fight is being fought in Afghanistan, how America is on the top of events over there, how nation building is progressing apace, how the Taliban has been eliminated, and what a great idea it was to introduce gender studies in Kabul University. So this is where they are coming from. The great Western media never asked any uncomfortable question of their administration as to where exactly is the money going. Today, we are told that almost $1 trillion was spent on creating and crafting the Afghan National Army. 300,000 soldiers trained, armed, and motivated by America. I doubt if anybody even saw 300 such soldiers actually putting up a resistance. So the shame is as much of the US administration as it is of Western media, which sold us the pup that everything was fine in Afghanistan, that the country had changed and that a new country had emerged. All that in the last 3-4 days between August 14 and today, all that has been proved to be a hoax. So that is where they are coming from. So instead of asking questions to their government or governments, instead of raising issues of abject failure, what they're doing is that they are trying to pin the blame, so to say, on India. I mean, what does India have to do about what's happened in Afghanistan? We were not into any great nation building exercise over there. We were not running gender studies courses. We were not trying to introduce American style democracy by bribing and paying off politicians or warlords. We were not part of the game at all. And to now say, I mean, just look at it this way. The Americans evacuated their embassy staff in a most spectacular manner. I don't know whether you were around when Saigon fell in 1975. I was in high school. And the image or images of Saigon's fall and the manner in which the US had to evacuate its embassy. I think it was 29th April 1975, because 30th April, the Viet Cong marched into Saigon. Just like the Taliban marched into Saigon within 24 hours. And the same images of helicopters landing on the roof of the embassy, evacuating Americans and flying off. So we saw a repeat performance in Kabul. Their president was actually, not only was he lying to the world, he was actually lying to his people when he said that, forget Vietnam, this will not be another Saigon. It was another Saigon. And at least Saigon people stayed with America, because it was at that time, there was the Cold War, the world was ideologically divided. And America was able to survive that defeat. But I doubt America will be able to survive its exit from Afghanistan. It's debacle.
A shameful exit, actually.
It's just that nobody is going to take America seriously anymore, and that's a fact, at least in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, one thing which stands out, that how these liberal democracies of the West, which are very sanctimonious towards countries like India, how they ran away like cowards in the cover of night. Look at the behavior of Sweden, the Dutch. They betrayed their own Afghan embassy workers and staff. They're not even picking up phones, no information. They have blocked their emails. And these are the countries which preach a lot to India how to deal with the Pakistan and the Islamist.
You see, the Scandinavians are very good at preaching to the world. They are sanctimonious. They are pompously moral, and they are self-righteous. And they never stop trying to tell the world how to live according to their version of how lives should be led, or how governments should perform, or how nations should be governed. And like you pointed out, one of the countries, they just left without even informing the local staff. And when the local staff tried to call them in desperation, they just wouldn't take the calls, and then they blocked their email addresses. Another country just upped and left. The local staff was left wondering what happened. And I think America has done the same thing. They are evacuating Americans because the American presence was huge. And they are evacuating Americans. They are not evacuating the Afghan, quote unquote, assets of America. The translators, people who worked with the troops, people who worked at the mission, they are not being evacuated. And America actually tried. It's shopping around for countries which will take in these people so that America is spared the problem of taking them in. They tried to get Bangladesh to take them in. Why should Bangladesh take them in? And we come back to where we began. The Western media is trying to poke India in the eye and saying that we are not taking in Afghans. What do they know? Within hours, something which India has never done. Even during the 1971 conflict, 1971 liberation war of Bangladesh, when millions of refugees poured into India, we did not react with such promptness. When refugees used to come in from Sri Lanka during the Sri Lankan conflict, we didn't have this kind of a mechanism in place. Within hours, the government of India had created a special visa category. There is no precedence because we are not officially signatories to refugee conventions. Historically, India has not encouraged refugees from coming into India because that adds to other problems. And as it is, we have our own basket full of problems. And despite that, we created a special category visa, an emergency category visa. We created a special e-visa. Afghans were not entitled to e-visas. We created an e-visa form for them. And we have openly said that every Afghan national can access this facility, that each form will be individually scrutinized. And unless something is found wrong with that individual, because you cannot open your doors to every Afghan for obvious reasons, there are security implications. After all, we cannot become the stockyard of the remnants of the Afghan insurgency or the spillover of the Afghan insurgency. So having done all that, and I don't mind naming the paper, the New York Times runs a story saying that we are prioritizing Hindus and Sikhs, and that there is no clarity whether Muslims can apply under this new visa category. I mean, what are they? I mean, I'm sorry to use this language. They must be morons not to be able to figure out that when a Government of India website says Afghan nationals, it means Afghan national of any faith, of any place, of any community, whether it is a Shia Hazara Afghan, whether it is a Sunni Afghan, anybody can apply. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, some things need to be stated.
I don't think they are morons. They are shameless. The same New York Times was asking Indian government to evacuate its propagandist, racist, bigoted people who are so-called journalists. I mean, I have no, let's say, restraint in calling out New York Times for the racist, bigoted paper it is when it comes to India. So I think they're simply being shameless, and within hours they went and started doing hit job against India. It seems that Taliban is not the problem. The problem is the CAA, the India Citizenship Amendment laws.
Listen again. Let me make this very clear that anybody, any institution, any organization, any country, any entity, any individual has the right, if not a legal right, or can approach the Government of India and seek help. After all, the Government of India is a sovereign government. It is not a government created through deceit like in Kabul by Washington, D.C. So this government, the Government of India, has always been open to calls for assistance, to calls for help. Don't forget that we welcomed the Dalai Lama. I mean, at that time, we didn't even have a rudimentary government structure in place. And policies were still evolving. So, if the New York Times approached us and asked for help to evacuate its journalists or staff in Afghanistan, the Government of India would definitely provide that assistance because that's humanitarian. But what the New York Times has done is extremely shameful. Yes, you are right. It is extremely shameful. They have run a story in these fraught times. Every word matters, every sentence matters, especially when it comes out in a paper like the New York Times. to say we are prioritizing Hindus and Sikhs and not thinking of Muslims. Oh, when we say Afghans can apply, it does not clarify whether Muslim Afghans can apply. I mean, it's inexplicable. And then they quote a Naxalite. They actually quote a Maoist, Kavita Krishnan, I think, to justify their claim. What kind of a paper is this? I mean, even the smallest paper shows greater integrity than New York Times has shown. I would like to see a report like a similar report in the New York Times on the Scandinavian countries, on Canada, saying that, oh, we are not going to evacuate the Gurkhas who are guarding our mission because they are Indians and Nepalis, and therefore India and Nepal can take care of them, and decamping from Kabul. I have not seen a similar report in the New York Times hitting out at Trudeau for this appallingly indecent callousness.
Yeah,
so
but
we have to see. Listen, we have to cope with it. We have to live with it. The Western media does what it does best, and that is to peddle fake news. And I think Donald Trump had it right when he said that these news organizations are peddlers of fake news, period.
But coming to the other point, why do you think that the Indian liberals are so deracinated so as to compare Taliban with BJP, or to say that the Taliban is better because it did a press conference, whereas the Prime Minister Modi has not done it?
You know, so many people do press conferences. What does it mean, end of the day? The Taliban did a press conference, not one, I think they did several press conferences. And they were so eager because there is a Soros type of operation happening behind the scenes, that there is an effort to rebrand Taliban as Taliban 2.0. And part of that effort, and this is not by accident or simply by design. There's great effort behind this. There's great strategy, media planning, strategic thinking behind this. It's like launching or relaunching a product. And part of that is how to sort of sell this pup, that it's a new Taliban that you are dealing with, that this is a quote unquote liberal Taliban, that they are mindful of being sensitive to women and to religious minorities, etc., etc. And the funny thing is, obviously, some of them who have been appearing on media have been tutored. And they have been tutored with great care, what to say, how to fend off questions, how to blur stuff when it's required. But somebody didn't tell them or give them a checklist of which media to talk to. And the funny thing is that the Taliban spokesman ended up giving an interview to the public broadcasting service of Israel, Khan News. And he was all over the place. And they were having a delightful time in the newsroom of Khan News, in the studios of Khan News. They got him to say everything except, I think if they had pushed a bit harder, they would have got him to say that the Taliban stands by Israel or whatever. And having realized that this happened, next day the spokesman said that, I have been speaking to so many people, so many journalists, so many organizations. I didn't realize that I was speaking to this Israeli news channel, etc. But tough luck, it happened. So whether Taliban talks to the press, whether Taliban gives a press conference, is of no relevance. Look at the footage which has been coming out of Afghanistan. Kabul is not Afghanistan. I mean, it is just a speck. It's just a dot on the map of Afghanistan. I usually don't get moved by videos and by people crying, because I have in my own life seen a lot of suffering in my own country. And so I frankly, and I've been in the field so long that perhaps I have become a bit of a cynic. But there's a particular video which has now gone viral of a young girl, possibly early teens, or maybe not even teens, clutching onto the gate of Kabul airport, crying and saying, "Please save me. The Taliban will come to my home." Now, when we talk of terrorism, what is a terrorist organization? A terrorist organization is one which practices terrorism. What is terrorism? Terrorism is something which serves to terrorize people, which serves to strike fear into the hearts of people. Now, this girl, she is so scared that the Taliban will knock on the door of her house. And that will not just be a casual knock to ask her family, "How are you? Is everything okay? Do you need any help? Do you need any food? We are here to serve you." That knock would be the precursor of taking away this girl forcibly. And this has been happening in Afghanistan in the last 1 week. There have been eyewitnesses that the Taliban has been forcibly taking away girls as young as 12 years old to serve as sex slaves of their jihadis. And since then, this was in the Daily Mail. And since then, footage has come out. One particularly horrific footage shows a young girl or a young woman being forcibly dragged away. And then to say, "Oh, they were so nice in the press conference. They were so polite. They said the right things. They said, yes, we are for women's rights within Sharia." What are women's rights within Sharia? And who are the people who are saying this? For them, women's rights, and I'm not passing any value judgment, it is their opinion. For them, women's rights is free of all established quote-unquote discriminatory laws, gender discriminatory laws. In a sense, I also subscribe to that view that there should be no gender discriminatory law in any country, and definitely not in India. And we have, over the years, bit by bit, either through case law or through legislative action, got rid of gender discriminatory law. The only place where we have not been able to bring about effective change is where individuals are governed by Sharia or Muslim personal law. barring, of course, making instant triple talaq illegal. So,
but it seems that a lot of people in India, especially the liberals, are very happy about Taliban victory. They see it as some kind of anti-imperialist struggle. Certainly, the left does. The Kavita Krishnan kind Naxals definitely, Naxal sympathizers definitely view it as a defeat of American empire. So we must support Taliban. But what about the a section, it seems a significantly large enough section of young Indian Muslims and also the political leaders who are congratulating Taliban and saying that we must learn lessons from Taliban to fight for Azadi in India.
So this is where this whole thing comes in. There is the global left, and the global left immediately aligns itself with any force that is dark, that is evil, that is murderous, that is everything that is, it can be anything. So long as it's a disruptive force. It's a force that unleashes anarchy. If that is assured, the global left will close ranks and stand with that force. It will endorse that force. It will legitimize that force. And this is not a one-off thing. Historically, that has been it. Now, within India, your question has two parts. The left liberals in India, incidentally, after the fall of Kabul, I would call them the Taliberal. And the left liberal in India sees this as a great opportunity to sort of reinvent the idea of anarchy, to reinvent the idea of disruption. So anything that is stable, politically stable, anything that is any idea that is conservative, and when I say conservative, it means in the classical sense conserving things that are good about society, politics, economy, that upsets them, because placidity is an antidote to leftism. So therefore, they must keep on creating enough disruption to remain valid. And yes, so it is therefore natural that they will sort of try to legitimize the Taliban, that they will want to be seen to be aligned with the Taliban, etc., etc. So this is the handmaiden concept. So the left liberal is a very good handmaiden of everything that is disruptive, destructive, and contrary to human goodness.
Yes, so the Dr. Ambedkar also said that the only thing the communists are good at is organizing the disorganization. Yeah, and if you also listen to the warning of other leaders, I mean, they have said the same thing from Patel to Kanshiram. Everyone has said the same thing about the Communist Party in the left: green snakes in the green grass.
Ambedkar also used the term grammar of anarchy. And left liberalism is essentially grammar of anarchy. Now, that is the left liberal part of it. The second is, why have there been statements of endorsement, of support, of welcoming the Taliban from certain Muslim leaders and from certain Muslim citizens or activists? The Ummah does not does not provide for making exceptions. So if an Islamic caliphate is taking shape in Afghanistan, then the Ummah is expected to support it. And this would be true for Muslims around the world. Does this mean that every Muslim would be supporting it? No. I mean, it's obvious that if so many Afghans, terrified Afghans, want to leave Afghanistan with the fall of Kabul, then it is obvious that it is not universal support. It's very interesting. Certain All India Muslim Personal Law Board members have made public statements welcoming the Taliban, praising the Taliban, and things like that. But the All India Muslim Personal Law Board has had to issue an official statement saying that we have not said anything, we have no view whatsoever on the Taliban, we have not taken a position, this is not our view, individual members have said it, please excuse us, we are not saying anything. Why did they say this? Because they also realize that there are enough Muslims today who are not going to take this nonsense. They have realized this because within the Muslim community in India, Muslim women today, they feel greatly empowered. They feel greatly enabled. I mean, that their agency, that they today have an agency. Ever since the criminality of instant triple talaq was declared illegal and a punishable offense. The All India Muslim Personal Law Board had actually thought that there would be a national uprising against this law, that every Muslim will be out in the streets. That didn't happen. Now contrast this to the actual birth of All India Muslim Personal Law Board. There was nothing called the All India Muslim Personal Law Board. Mrs. Indira Gandhi wanted to bring in a law on adoption, which would have made it possible for every Indian citizen to adopt a child. Because adoption, even I think, although I'm not very sure, but even among Hindus, it was a restricted option. And even much after that, guardianship was a major issue till such time the Supreme Court ruled on it, that women can be guardians. And definitely among Muslims, adoption was a no-no. When this Taliban tell us, they held a press conference and they said that women's rights will be protected and ensured, but under Sharia. So under Sharia, they can't adopt. And hence, Mrs. Gandhi wanted to bring about a law on a universal law on adoption, that if somebody's personal law were to prevent adoption, then they could seek remedy in this particular law. There were riotous mobs out in the streets. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, there were riotous mobs out in the streets, way worse than Then the Faltuka riots, which followed even after the banning of Salman Rushdie's book, The Satanic Verses. It was way more fierce than Sayyid Shahabuddin's call for boycott of Republic Day over the Shabano judgment. And it was then that all these mullahs came together and they formed the All India Muslim Personal Law Board, deceitfully named in a manner that it would seem as if it is a official body or it's a government sanctioned body or it's a government body. It is not. So that is where they come from. Today, I doubt they can sort of mobilize that kind of public protest over whether to welcome Taliban, not welcome Taliban, or as I said, I gave the example, the enactment of the law which prohibits instant triple talaq.
So my final question to you will be regarding the implications of this defeat in Afghanistan. And you may disagree, but I would say that this is the defeat of the Western liberal order at the hand of the Islamism. The liberal democracy failed, Islamism won. Now, with the rise of China, the appeal of liberal democracy was already in decline. The rise of the woke mobs in the West, the extremist left, we have seen that kind of propaganda, it was already discredited. Now, with the defeat in Afghanistan of the this Western liberal culture and order, democracy, do you think that we will see the retreat of liberalism and the liberal democracy all across the world?
I keep on telling people, and I had just accidentally walked into a clubhouse room, and there I mentioned this again, that one of the finest books ever written, it was called The End of Ideology, I think, if I'm not wrong. And it sort of presumed that after the Second World War,
End of History and the Last Man Standing, Francis Fukuyama.
No. This book is quite old. This was after the Second World War.
Okay.
And it presumed that Nazism was dead, fascism was dead, the right had been put down, the right had been put down, socialism had been rolled back, the Iron Curtain had come down, and therefore against communism. And therefore, that marked the end of ideology. And the only way of life, the only way of thinking, the only way of politics would be liberalism. So it would be, liberalism would have a monopoly. And it was in large part sustained, this argument was sustained by the liberal order which came up, the Atlantic order, the liberal order in Europe, in America, and the world began suddenly talking in terms of liberal democracy. But look at it this way, Abhinav. In the Cold War, it was supposed to be the ultimate triumph of everything that stood against communism. But did it really play out that way? There has been a surge of the right across Europe, across Asia, and beyond. The liberal order or the liberal arrangement is in a shambles. Within Europe, it's in a shambles. Within European Union, it's in a shambles. In America, it's in a shambles. And then something like this happens. Now, what is the impact this is going to have? The liberals, of course, will claim it's a great victory because ultimately this war has come to an end and all is fine, peace reigns in the world. No, it's not that. We can have an endless debate on whether America should have actually ever got into Afghanistan, whether America should have stayed put in Afghanistan. But, this war began as Operation Infinite Justice. Then it evolved into Operation Enduring Freedom. Now, popular memory is not very strong. It doesn't remember these things. And what does it end as? That you are once again, if you remember Richard Armitage calling up Musharraf, an assistant secretary of state called up actually President Musharraf of Pakistan and said that if you do not cooperate, we shall bomb Pakistan back to the Stone Age. It's on record. Where is Pakistan today? After 20 years of enduring freedom, where is Afghanistan today? And like someone pointed out, the late American empire has retreated to its shores. Now, who is going to trust America after this in terms of security partnership? There are some serious questions which will now come up. Can Japan actually sort of take it for granted that they will not be abandoned and dumped in a similar manner? Can Taiwan take it for granted that they will not be abandoned and dumped? After all, how is it in America's national interest? Can Australia take it for granted? And should India take it for granted? So these are questions which, of course, require much greater elaboration. But when you say what is the impact, China is jubilant.
Yeah.
The war was won by Britain. Or let me rephrase it. The war was won by the Allies. But it was Great Britain which was defeated. Because in one stroke, Great Britain became Little England. It was stripped of all moral legitimacy. It was stripped of all power, of global power. And similarly, the greatest power in the world has been shown up to be a papier-mâché tiger with the fall of Kabul.
Yep. Of course, those scenes, extremely shameful scenes which emerged from Kabul, how the people were trying to escape, how people were being shot by the American soldiers. There are reports how American soldiers threw off the passengers whose tickets were confirmed in order to accommodate the American citizens. I think that will be a very hard lesson, and that will be discussed and debated in every capital of the world, as you were saying. And
I just want to add something, just a small sentence, a caveat. You see, it's very easy to fall into this trap of anti-Americanism.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
And this will be one of the tropes doing the rounds. The radical left, the liberal left, the left liberal, they will all try to create this hawa that now is the time to abandon America and to switch sides and go over or walk across to China. It will happen.
Yeah.
Already, think tankers in Europe and America are quietly hinting that, after this, China's rise is a given and nothing can stop it and things like that. And I think that's a dangerous pitfall.
Yeah, but it's also dangerous not to be aware or to do an honest assessment of the American strategy and behavior in Afghanistan, especially the liberal establishment of the America.
When I criticize America, I criticize America as a friend of America. I wouldn't ever want my criticism to be seen or construed as anti-Americanism.
Yeah.
And America and Americanism over here is not just the country or the geography, but also its people. And the fact that it is the world's oldest democracy, the fact that there's much to learn and imbibe from the American system.
Agreed, but that's what is in question here now with the rise of this extreme kind of left in America itself, the kind of academia and the media we're seeing in the America, the woke culture. Do we really trust American establishment? Is America itself losing its moral authority?
As I said, that after Kabul, perceptions are going to radically change. And when again I come back to the fall of Saigon, the slogan in those days used to be, there were two slogans. One was Ho, 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 Ho Chi Minh, we shall fight and we shall win. And the second slogan was Yankee go home. Now, today, you will not find people actually saying, Ta, Taliban, we shall fight and we shall win. Nobody is actually, people are offended, people are upset, people are angry that the Yankee went home. So that is the difference. And I think there is great disappointment that the leader abdicated his role, that the leader turned out to be an abject coward. This is the sense that emerges.
Also, the press conference by Biden was a disaster.
I shall hold comment on it because, I think the Americans should really worry.
But
really worry.
Yeah. But thanks a lot, Kanchan sir. That was a very interesting discussion, an open and frank discussion. I think we as Indians need to do a very honest analysis of what's happening in Afghanistan, and especially what's happening with the Western powers, and their behavior, let's be very clear, was shameful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And thank you, audience, for listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join as a member if you want to support the channel.